Shelley, we still looking at two comments so far?
Yes, 2 so far.
Anybody in the Zoom, do you think, yet?
Right now, we have 95 attendees.
Holy cow.
Counting.
Now I'm nervous.
Don't be nervous. It's only going to get to 100. We can only have 100, right, Shelley?
Oh, really? It blows up at 100?
No, this version, we can do 500.
Oh, good. That's great.
That's terrifying.
All good. It'll be fine.
There were 1,000 last night in Lake Zurich, I heard.
Yep. It's kind of a hot topic right now.
Well, Lake Zurich had they have a hotspot in town there, right? Didn't they have problems with the COVID hotspot?
I think we're good, Mark. You're ready. We can go at any time.
All right, we still don't have Rich. Maybe you want to text Rich or see if he needs help.
Let me invite him.
We can begin without him, but all right. Welcome everybody to the Lake Bluff School District 65 Board of Education regular meeting. I'd like to welcome everyone to the July 21st meeting held using Zoom during COVID-19 pandemic. Our board members and members of the district's administrative team are participating remotely as there is currently a requirement on group sizes in an effort to limit the spread of the virus. As a public body, the Lake Bluff Board of Education is subject to the Illinois Open Meeting Act. Prior to this meeting, a public announcement was posted on our website announcing various participation options, including asking questions ahead of the meeting using a Google form. Additionally, members of the public who wish to participate in or attend this meeting should visit our website at www.lb65.org for further instructions. While the requirement of the Open Meetings Act have been relaxed during the global pandemic, the members of the Board of Education take their responsibilities as board members who are responsible to the public no less seriously. Leanne, could you please call the roll? Leanne?
Duran.
Present.
Hill.
Present.
Barry.
Present.
Charlot present. Gatchall.
Present.
Peg.
Not yet.
Oh, nope. John Marsden.
Present. And I believe that's everybody we have, right? So we have a quorum, we can begin. As always, the first thing we do in our meetings is we go to public comment. And I understand we have a couple of comments that have been emailed in. I also want to tell people that we will offer the opportunity for public comment at the end of the meeting. And I believe the technology has been worked out to do this live if you want to. So there is on our website, there is a link to join the Zoom feed for this video, for this conference. And through that, you can raise your hand at the end of the meeting if you want to make a live public comment. And Shelley, our administrator, will be managing that and letting people in to make public comment. So in the meantime, Shelley, do we have any live public comment now?
Not that I can see.
Okay, so we do have a couple of written ones, right?
Yes.
Would you like to read those?
Yes. Okay, so our first public comment is from Jonathan Mahoney. He addressed the Board of Education. He's saying, first and foremost, I would like to thank you and the entire administrative team in District 65 for your diligent and thorough work in planning during this unprecedented time. I understand that there are factors and pressures from every angle to consider in planning for the upcoming year. While the plan outlined by district administration provides a good start, there are simply too many details and concerns to still be addressed. A plan that banks on 20% of the student population opting for remote learning does not seem like a certain or viable plan. As you have your discussions in an important and historic meeting, I would ask that you reflect on a few points. I would ask that you go slow. There is no reason to be the first district back in the door. As we look at surrounding districts releasing various approved and tentative plans, it seems clear that no one really has the answer to this situation. I would strongly encourage you to consider the health of staff, students, and community members in this situation. While masks and social distancing are the order of the day, There's truly no way to guarantee that large groups of children will completely follow those recommendations and directives each day. Additionally, the demands of staff to police those behaviors as well as educate the in-person and remote learners while also balancing their own lives and family is simply too big of an ask. The staff in District 65 is unparalleled, but they deserve the resources, support, and respect to care for and educate our children. Overall, I ask one thing. As you sit in a Zoom Board of Education meeting yet again, please consider that you are about to ask our children and staff to gather in buildings in a month. If a 7-member board won't meet in person, how can the same board vote to put our children and staff in close proximity on a daily basis? Simply put, it is too soon to make this decision. There are indicators of the cases are rising. Now is not the time to simply return to in-person learning. Rather, I would ask that you delay the implementation of this plan, support the staff in creating a more robust remote learning experience, give our nation, state, and county an opportunity to manage this virus better, and allow our students and staff to return when we are sure it is healthy and safe to do so. The desire to return to in-person learning seems more based on a desire to return to normalcy than science. What were the case numbers when schools were closed in March? Can we definitely say the situation is better now, or are we just used to it? Again, please delay this return for the sake of all involved. Allowing a month or trimester to pass will give everyone an opportunity to gain more information and make more informed and safer decisions. Thank you for your time, Jonathan Mahoney.
Thank you, Mr. Mahoney. We appreciate your input.
The next comment is from Melissa Pasquazi, and she is saying, I am worried about the shortened schedule as proposed by the district. What exactly is the shortened schedule accomplishing? It was mentioned that there would be work expectations during the hours in the morning before the children attend, which seems absurd to me and virtually impossible for working parents to be part of. It was also mentioned that the Park District would be coordinating care during those morning hours, which would be an extra cost to any working parent. I wouldn't expect the Park District employees to facilitate the online learning during those hours as they are not teachers. The idea of a hybrid return to school would be better if the children were not in attendance daily, as proposed by the school. We need to think very hard if the risk of sending our children to school 5 days a week is worth being able to say that we did. I want my son in school, but not at the risk of contracting this virus, nor do I want anyone else's children to be put in danger so that Lake Bluff can say that our kids received a better education than districts who decided to do full remote learning. And that no more has come in so far.
Great. I would remind the audience.
We do have one, I'm so sorry. We do have one community member with her hand raised.
Oh,
Okay.
great.
Let me just,
We're going to test the technology.
yes, 1 second. Okay, and it looks like Barbara Maston. So I am going to allow you to talk. There we go. Okay, she is. Okay, I think she's, Barbara, I think you're muted. So if you can unmute your microphone.
Hey, and I'd just like to say that for the sake of consistency, before people start talking publicly, that if, I don't know how many people are going to want to speak, but we're going to limit comments to 5 minutes per person, just to say that in advance.
Okay, and so I think she just dropped off. She's not there anymore. I don't see her on the call. Elisa, can you see her? I don't see her anymore.
No, but we do have someone who has their hand raised now.
Okay, so Amanda. Okay. All right.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I second the comments of those that have already been made, and if we're going to do a return to school, would feel a lot more comfortable if we had staggered enrollment rather than everybody attending at the same time, like at the high school. I know that a lot of the surrounding districts are proceeding with e-learning. If that happens, that probably would be better than going back to school right now. I'm worried about the hand washing policies. I don't think there's enough hand washing stations right now. If we're going to go back, I think we need to have improved hand washing stations as well. So that, and then also we need to have clear procedures for when, if somebody is sick, how is that going to be identified? If somebody's been diagnosed, how is that going to be identified? And what will the procedures be after that? Will we all stay home? And will we be notified? Because I know the current procedures are that only the classroom where the student has fallen sick is notified. We have a lot of siblings in our district who are exposed and then expose that sibling's classroom, and that classroom's not notified as well. So there's a lot of increased potential for spreading the virus throughout various classrooms. So I appreciate your all's thoughts and the opportunity to speak here, and appreciate you all being very thoughtful with this decisioning, given that it's, our kids' lives and teachers' lives and the community's lives that are at stake. Thank you.
Amanda, before you hang up.
Yes.
We neglected to state that if you could state your name and address, your full name and your address for the record, which we typically do when we have in-person comment.
Sure. Amanda Demas. I'm at 339 West Prospect Avenue in
Great.
Lake Bluff.
Thank you for your comments. We appreciate it.
I have 2 children in the elementary school. So one going into 2nd grade and one going into the 5th grade.
Great. Anybody else?
We have, yes, we do have one more.
Okay.
Johnny G, if you can state your name and address for the record, please. I think, let's see.
I'm sorry, I went muted again. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, there I am. Sorry. My kids are with me half the time. My Lake Bluff.
Could you state your name and an address for the record, please, before you start?
It's Johnny Garneri. The kids live with their mom in Lake Bluff half the time. Her address that would be for the records is 442 West Witchwood Lane.
Thanks.
And my question is about this. I was hoping you guys might just talk a little bit about this Federation of Teachers thing I've been hearing about, because frankly, I'm a parent and I'm also a teacher in the area. I work, just to play devil's advocate here a little bit, I work at a local private school, and our student body size is pretty small, and we have a fairly large building. So we are going back 100% full time, unless IFBE or someone above us tells us that we can't. Because we're private, we're going to. We have an ideal space for it. We've already set up our classrooms. I've been there a couple times. We do have very mixed feelings about it amongst the staff, but the plan is it's the best case scenario for the kids. Although I will share that we are doing a full day session, 5 days a week. And we will be having a dual platform. So every day, if let's say that student doesn't want to or can't come to school or can't wear the mask or whatever, because we are a therapeutic school, they will have the option of learning from home. So we have smart boards in the classroom and cameras in there. So we've kind of set it up that way with the hope that no matter what the situation is, we'll be able to sort of push through with either e-learning or in-school learning, and really leaving it up to the families, because obviously there's families that aren't going to have the resources to be able to go completely remote. And I know you guys are like totally faced with this challenge on a much bigger level, but I did want to share that. And I was hoping to find out a little more about this, because I've only heard it on the news and I've only been teaching a few years. So I don't know what this Illinois, I don't know if it's the Illinois Federation of Teachers or something, but to me as a parent and even as a teacher, even though it wouldn't be ideal, it would really be nice to know that either everyone was going back full time or everyone was staying home full time, because I think it's that schedule and it's that uncertainty that's hard for like parents in the community. But if you guys could at some point talk about that, or if there's a link someone could share with me about that, I'm curious to find out more about what the Federation is and whether, even if any of you have heard anything about ISBE, and do you think there's a chance, are they looking at COVID numbers? Are they looking at spikes? You know, is there a chance you'll make a plan and then a week into August, we're all just gonna be home? So that's it. Those are my comments. Thank you guys for doing this. It's really informative, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm hopefully looking forward to getting back to school at some point.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, we have more comment.
Hi, please state your name and address for the record.
It's for India. Go ahead, India.
I think you're muted, India.
Can
There we
you
go.
hear me now?
Yes.
There we go.
Perfect.
Yes.
Good evening. My name is India Boffman and I live at 714 Smith Avenue. My question is kind of regarding the way that school will be taught, especially in the middle school. Last year, I have a child in the middle school and in the high school. And one of the suggestions I have is for the teaching to be done via Zoom, where the teacher is actually giving the lesson on Zoom instead of just giving independent learning. My middle schooler really struggled with kind of giving an assignment and having to do that independently. So if there is a remote option chance, my suggestion just would be that a teacher would be lecturing via Zoom, and that could also work in a classroom if you have kids in the classroom and also kids remotely. It would be able to hit everything. So that was just my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, I would make the suggestion to other people who are waiting to speak. You're welcome to speak, but Dr. Leali is going to give an extensive presentation on how this is going to, as of now, how this is going to play out. And some of your questions might be answered then, and then you could come back at the end and ask follow-up questions. But if anybody would still like to ask questions, please feel free.
We have another one, Joy Marquis.
Joy, please state your name for the record and your address.
You guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. It's Joy Marquis, 117 West Blodgett Avenue. I just wanted to, first of all, thank you guys for all the hard work that you've been doing. I've been watching the Return to Learn videos and the task force, and it's been an incredible amount of work that you've done. So I appreciate that. I think my question was more centered. Again, I have a rising 8th grader. And so looking forward to high school, my question is a little more centered about the academics and what changes we're going to see in the curriculum and academics this year, because clearly the school day will be shortened, which may have some effect on just the way the kids are learning. So that's really kind of my question, and I have a feeling that will be answered later on.
Thank you, Joy. Anybody else?
I think that's it for right now.
All right, so I'll just remind everybody that we will do this again at the end of the meeting, so you will have a chance after you watch the presentation to come back to us. So now we're going to move on to the President's report. And I want to start out the report with a little bit of a celebration and point out that this is Dr. Leali's first board meeting. She only just started July 1st. And so she's been working for us for 21 days, but I think in COVID time, that translates to, what is it, 7 years per day in COVID time. The amount of hours she has put in already has added up to something beyond what we want to really even consider. But just wanted to officially welcome her to the district and introduce her to, it's actually very good that we have such a big crowd watching. Dr. Leali has an extensive background in education, serving many, many years at the Hawthorne School in a variety of administrative and teaching positions. She was also the Chief Education Officer at the Sears School down in Kenilworth, and also the interim superintendent there, and has just joined us as of July 1st. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knows that she's with us on board and has been working really hard and getting to know her staff very well. So welcome.
Thank you.
I also want to point out that as I do every meeting, I'm going to do this all the way through November, is we have elections coming up in 2021. We have 4 school board positions that will be opening up. And we are looking for people to run for school board in the next election. If you are interested, the elections are in April, but your paperwork is due in December of this calendar year in 2020. So if anybody would like to learn more about what it's like to be on the school board, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or any of the other board members. Our emails are all on the website, and would be glad to talk you through or meet with you and tell you all about what we do. It's very meaningful and rewarding work, and we are looking for people who have a passion for that sort of thing. I wanted to end my president's report by initiating a little bit of a discussion about how we hold our meetings. One of the comments we've heard from already this evening, and I've heard it in the community a few times, is, how do we send our kids, how do we talk about sending our kids back to school when we don't even have meetings in person? And so the question to the board is, we're not sure about the emergency declaration for August. The emergency declaration that the governor's made is what allows us to do these meetings remotely. And that expires at the end of this month. Don't know if that will be renewed. But what is the board's feeling about meeting in person, and where would we do that? Recall that the village board, village hall is fairly confined space. We could probably space out, but it might require some rearranging and some work. So just wondering how the board feels about in-person meetings if we are allowed to choose.
Well, I know for me, I think it's hugely important that we meet in person before we send anybody back into our buildings. The one caveat to that is that if we're still at a 50-person only per room or per area, we would have to cap public attendance. We obviously couldn't have 127 attendees like we do right now. So maybe having the option to join in remotely plus us be in person. But I do think it's important that our board meets in August in person before we send people back into our buildings.
Yeah, I agree with the conclusion, not necessarily the logic, just because I think this kind of meeting works effectively, whereas school, I think, it's an ongoing process and a different consideration for what kids' needs are. But nonetheless, I am certainly not averse to meeting in person. That's generally how I think more effective meetings are conducted. So I agree with that.
I don't disagree with either one of you. I probably know a little bit too much about this virus. My son's a virologist and he's heavily involved in the vaccine solution. And he advises me that we're only at the beginning of this. So I'm very concerned about both our kids and our teachers being in school, as well as us being together in a room. So for the time being, until we see some light at the end of this tunnel in terms of direction, we're not seeing that yet, and it can very well change. I saw a report yesterday where students in Israel went back to school recently, and within 2 weeks, the coronavirus cases spiked dramatically. So I'm very concerned about that, not only for, as I said, our students, our teachers, but also our board. So I would be one that would be doing Zoom for as long as I can until I feel safe, or I'm advised by my son otherwise.
Anne, you have any thoughts on that, or Leanne?
I'm in favor of meeting in person. I think, we can socially distance, wear masks, do it in a safe way, but I agree that it's effective, better way to meet is in person.
I mean, in life in general, in person is better, but for me, not at this time.
Yeah, we don't have Rich back yet, by the way. We haven't figured out how to get Rich on
So
video.
listen, Rich texted me and he wants me to send him the link. He doesn't have it and I
We're
can't
working.
figure out how to do that.
Shelley's
Okay,
sending it.
thanks.
And then my point of view is a little bit of a hybrid of all you guys. I do agree that in-person meetings are better. I'm a little bit of a germaphobe and probably pretty uncomfortable to go back to especially a confined meeting in Village Hall. I think maybe something in like one of our gymnasiums where I'm way apart in a corner, I could probably calm myself down and work with. But so yeah, it sounds like we have kind of a mixed perspective on that. We need to. I guess it depends on where this goes and where the governor's order is. And then also what our legal team tells us. What are we required to do? You know, what if the order is rescinded, the emergency order is rescinded? Do we go back to the way it was where there are no exceptions for, the only exceptions are work and sick and illness?
Mark, I think at this point, it's a matter of taking it week by week. There can be a lot of things changing in the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and to decide something now. I agree with being in person is obviously much better than talking on this machine, but I just don't think anyone at this point can predict with any degree of certainty where this is going to go, even in the next 6 weeks.
I agree.
I agree with that. I just want to say again, I think we govern a district that has employees and students, and if we're asking the employees of the district that we govern to meet in person in some confined spaces, I think we need to be willing to set that example as well. At least some of us. I feel pretty strongly about that. I know there's mixed opinion. I respect everybody else's opinion, but I do want to say if we are requesting as part of our plan that some people will be in the building when we govern a district that we're asking people to do that, and I think we need to model that as well.
Okay. I thought it was important that we air that out a little bit and have this as an ongoing conversation. And we will pick this up again when we know more. So we're going to move on to our reports. We have one report that's going to occupy most of the meeting tonight. It's the Return to Learn 2020-2021 report. Dr. Lealy and her team will deliver. But before that starts, I just want to tip the hat to her and her team for many, many hours of work put into this, and involving the Return to Learn committee, which had teachers and community members and board members and administrators, and they met every week for, I don't know, many, many weeks. And it's all that is, by the way, is documented on the district website. If anybody's curious as to the genesis of the report you're about to see, it's all there for you to see. But I just want to show appreciation and gratitude for Dr. Lealy and her team. Thank you for all the work and the detail. And I don't know if anybody wanted to say anything else. So why don't we
I
get
mean, I echo that. I think they've done a great job, and I'm really impressed with the level of detail and care that's gone into preparing that plan.
I agree.
And the teachers too, being in that remote learning, even just today, you know, in a meeting similar to this with 30 people from our district in there, including teachers who don't work in the summer, this is their time off, this is their vacation, to be able to contribute weekly and even more than that in their committee meetings. I think shows what a great district we have. So thanks to all of you, and Lisa, coming into this and providing the leadership you've provided has been amazing as well. So echo your sentiments, Mark.
All right, and so with that, Lisa, you want to bring us the Return to Learn presentation we've all been dying to see?
Yes, thank you so much. And I would like to thank you very much for the warm welcome, not only here, but also from the community members, parents, teachers that I've heard from since way back. I feel like I've been here a long time, able to be in the district a lot, given the circumstances. So I do also want to recognize what a difficult time it is right now to be an educator. It is also a very difficult time to be a parent. I understand that, our team understands that, and I want to assure you that those two thoughts are top of mind as we have been developing our plan. We've been working really hard collaboratively, like we talked about, with lots of different stakeholders to create a plan that's going to keep our students and staff safe and healthy and accommodate the needs of the community while we kind of move forward with our goals for academic growth and achievement to the best of our ability. And the admin team will be helping me present tonight. And so we will welcome questions throughout the presentation from the board. Please feel free to stop us and ask us for clarification. There's a lot of information here. It has been in development for quite some time, and we hope to answer as many questions as we possibly can. tonight. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And our goal is, as always, to develop a plan for school that holds true to our mission and vision. We know what those are, and we take that responsibility very seriously, regardless of where our students will be learning. We know that this is our responsibility as a district. As we've been developing our plan, obviously with anything, any type of future planning, we have to make some assumptions. And these assumptions we've talked about in the task force, and they've been modified as we've moved through the process, but I want to highlight a few. We have been working with the assumption that if we are going to bring students back safely, we need at least 20% of our students to be, or to choose to be, or needing to be home on a remote basis, either every day or for an extended period of time, so that we can adhere to the guidelines that we are trying to work within. We also assume, given the changing nature of this virus, the fact that we do exist in the context of Lake County and Illinois, and we know that our numbers are ticking up, that we will at some point need to be in remote learning as a district, either because of contacts and positive cases, or because of our health department telling us that we need to go remote. We know that we will have students, staff, and family members who will be getting sick. And we know that that means that we need to do screening. We need to limit interactions between folks when they're in our buildings. We need to limit travel within the building. And when we do have confirmed positive cases, that we need to be able to trace contacts from multiple days prior to the positive test result. And we know that that process for contact tracing and evaluating who should be at school and who should be home doing remote learning will take some time. I've been articulating a lot with the surrounding districts in Lake County, and in particular, we've heard a lot about the Lake Zurich case and the cases that happen there. That process for contact tracing takes time. It takes time to coordinate with the Lake County Health Department. It takes time to coordinate with families and any people who have been in close contact with cases. So we know that that's an issue we will be contending with. We are assuming that our staff, faculty, parents, and community will be honest with us about close contacts, about symptoms, about positive diagnoses. We have to work together as a community for this. And we are hopeful, and we are confident that our community will work together to have honesty about what's happening so that we can protect each other. We know that the guidance that we receive as a school district will continue to at times be contradictory, and the guidance comes from all different places, right? And even just today when we talk about board meetings and where we want to have our meetings, we're each kind of relying on different sets of guidance. Sometimes it's contradictory, and it will continue to change because we don't know yet everything there is to know about this virus. We also know, just like the previous discussion, that opinions of the community will continue to be varied. In the surveys that we've done, we have seen that evidenced. We have a segment of the community that has very strong beliefs about the virus and about how we should handle it that are different from other segments of the community. And we've seen that across the country. And we recognize that that's something that's present in our community that we will have to try to address. We also know that there will be times when we need to move quickly between platforms, just like we saw last spring when we had to shift to a remote learning platform quickly. That may happen again, and we need to be prepared for that as a team, as a community. We have already recognized the need to adjust our spending and budgets to address the needs of our community during this time, if we are going to be bringing students back or as we plan for remote learning. And we recognize that we need to communicate as early and as often and be as transparent as possible and as often as is helpful. Some of the feedback we received was about streamlining communication, the amount of communications. We're trying to strike the right balance there. We also are working with the knowledge that we have about this virus. This is, these are generalizations, but things that we pretty much can agree on at this point, that the virus is airborne. We know that masks help. We know that being outside is better than being inside, or being inside in well-ventilated areas is better than being in non-ventilated areas. We know that regardless of where and how we check symptoms, that at times the virus can be transmitted even when the symptoms are not apparent. Children seem less likely to be transmitters of the virus, but even this weekend we heard a little bit more about older children being more able to transmit the virus to adults between 10 and 19. We do definitely know that adults transmit the virus between each other. We also know that it's mutating and that it changes. rapidly, and that we are still learning about it and the long-term effects of being infected with the virus, and the severity of the virus matters at that point. So as we've been making our plan, we've been trying to work with some decision-making protocols or principles so that we can guide the decisions that we're making as a group. Staff and student safety and well-being are top of the list. We are also looking at how we can support our staff and students with their social emotional health and wellness. Certainly academic achievement, moving forward with our goals for students academically, is at the top of the list. We have a lens of equity and want to make sure that whatever parents decide for their family and for their children, that regardless of those logistics, we want equity for our students and consistency and continuity when we have to shift, because we're again assuming that at some point we are going to need to shift to a remote only platform. And then finally, we want to be a support to our community. We recognize there are people in the community, there are families in the community that need us to provide education for them, to provide a place for their students to be that is safe and that provides them support for their social emotional wellness and academic achievement. So those are our principles that we've been working with. Those are our priorities. And we also feel fortunate, I've been very fortunate to have been able to meet multiple times with community partners in the village, specifically the village, the park district, the library, and we are all aligned in the fact that we believe this is a severe situation, and we want to make sure that we are serious about how we're handling it as a community. Like I said, we do exist in a context, and what happens in our larger community will impact us as a school district. And so we are encouraging our community to help us by wearing masks, watching the physical distancing, and washing hands a lot. We've heard this from many people that these are three things that we can do to help flatten the curve and diminish the spread. So the plan we are about to present attempts to address all of the above. We know that this is an evolving plan as the guidance changes, as we know more about the virus, and we will continue to adapt as we need to. So what is being presented tonight is our recommendation for safely beginning school in the fall of 2020, given the current pandemic, guidance from our State Board of Education and other agencies. And this is the plan as of today, July 21st, 2020. What is the board's role? Although we don't need an official vote per ISB guidance, that this is the superintendent's responsibility and purview to create this plan, we do bring you the plan tonight for your approval. And we'll continue to provide regular updates on the feedback we're receiving and the results that we are getting as we implement our plan. And we welcome all discussion and questions. So please, again, ask away. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the calendar adjustments that we are going to be making for this school year. They're minor, but worth noting. So ISB is allowed for 5 additional days to plan for the reopening of schools, and also the ongoing development that we will need to do as we try to sustain between remote and in-person instruction. Those 5 days are flexible for us to use where we'd like. And we do recognize that given the plan you are about to hear about, our teachers and staff need some additional time to prepare so that we can do this well. So we are moving 1 teacher institute that was regularly scheduled for the middle of the year to the beginning of the year, and we are also placing 2 remote learning planning days at the beginning of the year. So we are going to be having the week of August 17th be a full institute week. August 18th, 19th, and 20th will be teacher institute days for work. August 21st and 24th, the 24th being a Monday, will be remote learning planning days. And we will have students begin school on August 25th. Our last day of school at that point will be June 3rd. And then of course we would have emergency days if we needed to use those. And we are going to go ahead and not have the early release days that are usually scheduled in our monthly calendar, with the exception of potentially parent-teacher conference early release days. That was an adjustment that was made to the calendar last year to kind of shift how we're doing parent-teacher conferences. And we will see at that point where we are with having parents come in or how we want to schedule conferences. But we will, given these adjustments, have 3 remote learning planning days left to be flexible with throughout the year. And so our calendar committee, our internal calendar committee that has administrators and teachers that work on it, will meet at benchmark times and determine how we're doing and where we might need to use those flexible days, those 3 days. and we will give the community as much notice as we can. As we remember in the spring, when we needed to shift to remote learning, those days were essential because we had a day to turn around, right? And kind of grab our belongings and move to a different platform. I anticipate that if some kind of a long-term closure or large-scale shutdown were to happen again, that we would need to shift, those would be the ideal days to use for those remote learning planning days to give our teachers time to kind of shift entirely the platform. So as we look for how instruction is going to be organized, like I said before, consistency in programming is key. We know we're going to have individual students who will need to quarantine, potentially classrooms who would need to quarantine based on close contact, or again, our whole school. And so our goal is to create a consistent and seamless experience for our students this year that isn't as difficult or disjointed as we all experienced last spring across the state and the country. So in order to achieve that, our team has decided that remote learning needs to be our foundational platform, because we know that at some point this year, all students will be experiencing the remote learning platform. And I would like, and our team, our administrative team would like the majority of our curriculum and instruction planning on behalf of our staff to be creating and implementing a robust and effective remote learning experience that would create consistency for our students and families throughout any kind of mandated quarantines or school closures. So again, our foundational platform will be that remote learning piece, and we'll talk later in the presentation about what we're doing to make sure that that is a better experience and an improved experience from the spring, and what we think we can do in terms of consistency for that. But again, after that, the other consistent pieces for students, regardless of where they will be doing their learning, will be our curriculum. All students will be assessed at the beginning and throughout the year in order to address learning gaps that have taken place, or learning lapses or losses, and differentiate for student needs moving forward. We will hold all students to the same instructional outcomes, and the curriculum content that is covered will be the same regardless of where students are, either at home or in school. We will be scheduling times for remote learners to pick up materials that they might need to make the facilitation of remote learning easier at home, and to keep the experience as consistent as possible between the two platforms. We have also decided that we will have one learning management system, and that will be Google Classroom, that all students will be accessing to organize their schoolwork and to interface with that remote learning platform. We are designing a consistent web page so that families can anticipate what that page is going to look like to go and access their work and the links that they will need for their work. And all online meetings will be on Zoom. So last year, I think we used some Google Meets, we used some Zoom. We have invested in Zoom as a platform because we believe it has some features that would be helpful for us in facilitating remote learning for all students. We will have all students experiencing the same grading system, and our new standards-based hybrid report card is in development and will be ready for the first trimester of all students who attend Lake Bluff Middle School in the fall. And then finally, all of our students will have access to the same software and programming so that they can have the same resources, no matter where they are experiencing their instruction. So we get to the choice that we are asking our community to make. And I understand that while choice sometimes can feel like a relief to some folks, for other folks that can be add to the difficulty of the situation, but we are trying to address the needs of every family member and every family and community member that we have. So the three choices we bring to the community tonight are these. Knowing that remote learning will be our platform, we are asking that parents either choose to be doing remote learning at home, or doing remote learning in school with us, or potentially, if we can, a hybrid model where school students would be coming to us to have their remote learning facilitated certain days of the week. And because of the issues that we've talked about regarding the virus and the fact that we are seeing an increase, and we know that at some point our students will most likely be in remote learning, for student and staff safety and to reduce the numbers of students down to the lowest number, we are encouraging our families to choose remote learning at home if it is possible for them. The criteria for whether or not that is a possibility for families is completely at the family's discretion. I know as a working mom with 3 children, that is a hard decision to make. Because I also know that all school districts, given ISB's guidance to enhance and improve remote learning experiences for students, Most school districts will be having more face-to-face instruction, more scheduled time in remote learning. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, and that may be difficult for some families to achieve. And so again, when families cannot do remote learning at home, we are opening up school and want them to come to us for us to help students facilitate that remote learning experience with us. And again, the ability for us to do sort of a hybrid schedule for families will depend on what our families choose. And like we just talked about, we will probably be in a hybrid situation for board meetings by August, but again, that's an evolving discussion. So as we move through the presentation, we're going to be talking a little bit more about what each of these versions of remote learning will look like, but that is the basic choice that we will be asking our families to make next week. So let's talk about what this means. So if remote learning is our platform, we're talking about Google Classroom, we're talking about Zoom meetings, how does that look either at home or in school? And so again, we're going to be making improvements to remote learning from the spring. And if parents choose to do that at home, it will be a more robust remote learning experience, delivered real time, more synchronous learning, some independent learning experiences as well. There will be opportunities for the students to work from home with teachers and also with classmates over Zoom and get feedback given to them digitally. Grading and assessment will be consistent. Obviously, if students are at home, no other safety precautions will need to be put in place. And we're hoping that we will have opportunities for students to engage with each other, maybe outside, virtually, extracurricularly, or with opportunities that we may be able to create through our partnership with the Park District. Now, if parents and families cannot do the remote learning piece at home, students may come to us to have that experience facilitated at school. And so the students that come to us in school will essentially have two teachers, one that they will interact with remotely over Zoom sessions for their direct instruction, and an in-school teacher that will act more like a facilitator. Students will be working both at home on some work, independent, and also at school with additional opportunities for limited socialization at school. You know, as we get into what safety precautions we're going to need to take, how school will look because of that, you will begin to see how that socialization aspect of school is going to look very different because of what we'll need to put in place to keep everyone safe. The same minutes for learning will be for both platforms. Students will be engaged about the same amount of time. Again, grading and assessment will be consistent no matter what the platform. Safety protocols will be in place, including mask wearing at all times indoors, sometimes outside if we can't maintain 6 feet of physical distancing. Lunch will be eaten in the classroom with a small group of students, and it will be very different in terms of a feel of a normal school day. What we're talking about is really distanced, really kind of interacting with that remote platform and having facilitation with a teacher there to help support. But it's not going to be, you know, at a table group having discussions and things like that, because we just can't have kids interacting that way inside. We will be organizing the students that choose to be in person with us by grade. For the most part, I'm believing that's going to be possible, but again, a lot of this depends on what families choose, and the groups will stay consistent in school as much as possible. Remote teachers will be the grade level teachers and content specialists. So those ones providing direct instruction over the Zoom sessions will be the grade level and department teachers. And our in-school facilitators will be the appropriate grade level teachers as much as possible. So to kind of illustrate this, what might it look like? So essentially we have 2 students here. Let's assume they're in the same grade, and one is at home. You can see he's in the kitchen, and one is at school. Both are on their laptops. They may be both working in the Google Classroom collaboratively together, or they may be on the same Zoom session, watching the same teacher who, let's say, is their one of the 5th grade teachers. The student who is working at school also has an in-school facilitator who would probably also be a 5th grade teacher that would be able to support him as he moves through the remote content, the independent activities, help him stay focused and on task, and keeping those 2 students kind of in the same place, content and curriculum wise, where the student at home is obviously working with their own family support system, but also with that remote teacher providing individualized or differentiated support over Zoom sessions like we saw in the spring. So that's basically the difference between the in-school and at-home options. Now, when we return to a phase 3 or have to go to a large-scale closure, these two students would have Zoom sessions with both of their facilitators in the room. So again, when we move to that platform where all students are remote, they would already know both of those teachers. They would have been working with those teachers. And then when it's time to give individualized or differentiated support, that groups of students would work with the teacher that they've been working with for that all along. The student then that was in school, though, would just be doing that remotely. Are there any questions about the basic models before we move on? And I'm going to turn it over to Tracy to talk a little bit about students with special needs, IEPs, 504 plans, or enrichment support, but I can take some questions right now if you'd like. Okay, Tracy, are you ready?
Yes. So our staff and administrators are working to design plans to meet the needs of all students. And we have many students with special learning needs. So our staff and administrators will work with students and families to ensure a free, appropriate public education for students with specific learning plans. A guiding principle of our work is collaboration with families to ensure that IEPs and 504 plans are implemented in the least restrictive environment and in consideration of the health and safety of our students. Just as classroom teachers will assess student gaps in learning, our student services team will assess students at the beginning of the year to determine where students have gaps in their individualized goals. They will continue to monitor progress throughout the school year, and our special education staff will collaborate with general education teachers in order to support the high levels of learning. Additionally, our district will continue to abide by any state or federal special education timelines for 504 meetings, IEP meetings, and evaluations. These meetings with parents will be held remotely in order to minimize the number of people coming within the building and that potentially spreading of the virus. Students who require ELL supports or enrichment supports will receive those supports whether they attend in person or as a remote option. These will be equally available in either setting. We know that students will re-enter learning in the fall and have processed their emotions around the events of the spring and summer in a myriad of different ways. And we are developing different ways to meet the social emotional needs of students to support their engagement in school.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. We are going to go ahead now and talk a little bit more about both of the options, what it would look like, and each of the options, going through kind of what a school day would look like and kind of trying to illustrate a little bit more about our two options. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Bay, the new principal of Lake Bluff Elementary School, who also has had an interesting transition into a new role, but she's got a great perspective, having been in the district and having worked on the curriculum side. So Kelly.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Lealy, and good evening, everyone. I want to talk a little bit about our enhanced remote learning. We know that we need to move seamlessly between in-person and remote, and so there will be a lot of parallels here. I first want to take the opportunity to define a couple of terms that may be new for you. You may have heard them, but you're not quite sure what they mean. So synchronous instruction or synchronous learning is really learning that's occurring at the same time. So imagining that live instruction with students and teachers interacting through video conferencing in real time. We've made the decision, as Dr. Lealy said, that we will be utilizing Zoom as our common platform for synchronous instruction. Asynchronous instruction is instruction that is occurring at different times. So thinking pre-recorded instruction, self-guided or independent learning. So I want to take a moment here first to acknowledge we have referenced multiple times that our remote learning in the fall will look different than the spring. And we have information from surveys and feedback that is what is driving our decision making on how it will look different in the fall. Want to just point out a couple of areas in the feedback that was received via surveys and feedback. So this is feedback that came from parents, teachers, and even students as we gathered information to help us move forward. So acknowledging that our learning and communication needs attention. The synchronous and asynchronous instruction, as I just defined, we've got a split there though. Some felt as though there was not enough of the live instruction, and others perhaps that there was too much or time that they needed to be face-to-face or on their devices. Our delivery of content needs to be sort of streamlined and looked at. Our grading and academic expectations are also going to be reviewed and carefully looked at. We want to acknowledge that some reasoning for those expectations and quite a bit really came through our ISB guidance, and we needed to adhere to that in order to be in alignment with those expectations. We're also really looking at student supports, as Tracy acknowledged, in the areas that she defined. We really want to make sure that things are universally available, not only for students with IEP and 504 needs, but all students. We're also looking at our student device and access, making sure that we have equitable access to the devices that are needed. We are acknowledging in this moment that we listen to your feedback and are really making plans carefully. The last part to just note here, consistency and really looking at authentic ways for students to experience learning that doesn't always rely on being on a screen or on their device. And so really getting creative and understanding that technology can enhance learning, but we want to be really cognizant and aware of what students need and how we can provide alternate ways for that type of learning. So want to provide some information here specific to Lake Bluff Elementary School and what the school day will look like at home. So I'm going to provide you with times for learning, and then I'm not going to get into a lot of detail with sample schedules, but I do want to outline the amount of minutes that we are agreeing upon at this time for instruction to occur for our learners. So for families of students and children in our early childhood or pre-K program, we are going to be running a similar schedule with our pre-K 3s from 8:30 to 10:50 and our pre-K 4-year-olds coming from 12:20 to 2:45. I want to note for this slide and a couple that follow, one that I will talk about and one that Principal Nate Blackmer will talk about, the daily percentages of that synchronous, the live instruction versus the asynchronous will really vary depending on the activities and needs of our students. We do want to make a very conscious effort, though, for those live synchronous start times to be consistent from day to day. We know that navigating schedules during this time can be complex and difficult, but it's not new for us that structure is valuable for our youngest learners all the way through our oldest and even adults as we move through these new plans. So a little bit of an outline here on what families can expect for early childhood: a morning meeting, instruction based on needs, and individualized education plans or IEPs. We definitely want to include that live instruction for our littlest learners and specials each week. And so allowing space for students to engage in wellness or physical activity, music, and hopefully some library and tech, depending on the schedules that we're able to develop. Next, our larger population. So for grades kindergarten through 5th grade, an outline of what we can expect for their days. Again, noting that the daily percentages will really vary depending on needs. So we want to ensure, as Tracy Rorick mentioned, that social emotional time is an area that is of major importance and emphasis. So classroom check-in meetings really occurring daily and live for all of our students kindergarten through 5th grade. And I just think it's really important to point that out because that's valuable for our learners and really to launch their day or to have a check-in in a day. Our math block will be approximately 40 to 45 minutes with synchronous and asynchronous. ELA or English Language Arts, we're looking at designing 90-minute blocks for that instruction. And then differentiated and small group support We know that's going to look different for students that are coming in person for remote learning, but we know that we need to create time and space for small group instruction, conferencing between teacher and students, and even student to student. That's the best practice learning that we've really been working on developing throughout our programming. And so there will be time for that in this new Return to Learn plan. As far as some other academic areas, science or social studies works on a rotating schedule and always has based on the unit. We don't want that to fall off, but we are going to add in a social emotional asynchronous daily instructional time that would happen across, depending on the unit. So rotating some social studies or science along with social emotional learning. We're going to be bringing in specials for our K-5 learners. 20-minute blocks are what we're striving for at this time. And then our special education 504 plans we're going to adhere to those. We will ensure that there are breaks, movement breaks, mask breaks, and a lunchtime will be built into the day. The last part to acknowledge is because of that delayed start, we do need to create time and space for some independent work done outside of the instructional day. We're working very hard to streamline that and make it accessible for families and students. I'm going to shift over to Nate Blackmore to talk about our plans for 6-8.
Thanks, Kelly.
Hey, thank you, Kelly. So one of the things that I should know before I start to talk about the middle school, and obviously it looks a little bit different than elementary, is that rather than reporting out on minutes per day, we're looking here at minutes per week. And the reason for that is that we're proposing a block schedule for much of the synchronous learning that would be done. And if you're a quick math whiz and you're adding it all up, what you'll see here is that these minutes are equivalent to what you would expect during our normal sort of schedule from 8:30 to 3:30. And if you're wondering how that works, that's because we are able to include both the synchronous instruction that would occur from 10:30 to 3:30, but also the asynchronous instruction that would occur outside of those hours. So we're targeting the same amount of instructional time that we would have in our traditional schedule going forward. And so that means 300 minutes per week in math and LA, 200 minutes for science, social studies, Spanish. We're also working to identify a fine arts schedule that allows for kids to participate in a fine arts class. In all likelihood, that would be every other day. And I should also mention that in a shortened synchronous day, in order to preserve an adequate amount of time for class, that block schedule is going to allow students to participate in 4 classes in one day. That includes their either health wellness course or their fine arts course. And then the following day would be the other 4 classes that they were not participating in the day before. This allows us to have a reasonable chunk of time for instruction to be delivered. We've also built in what many would be familiar with. ELO is the acronym that we use, Extended Learning Opportunity. There is a variety of things that would be done during that time. Most importantly, delivery of SEL instruction, supporting students with their executive functioning skills and organization skills. So we'll be working to refine what the ELO would look like in a remote learning environment. Much like Kelly had already explained, for us at the middle school, the remote learning option and the in-person learning option, our goal is to really make those the same experiences for kids, regardless of whether they're at home or at school receiving some support from us. So that's the real, sorry, I'm on to the next slide.
Sorry about that.
No problem. And if we move ahead then into the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that schedule that I alluded to earlier. This schedule defines both for early childhood and elementary and middle school when we would be targeting the synchronous learning instruction. So when you talk about 10:30 to 3:30 at the middle school, we would have a schedule for each of those classes that I mentioned already, the 4 on one day and the next day, the other 4 classes. And that would be occurring between the hours of 10:30 and 3:30 at the middle school, 10 and 2:50 at the elementary school. And as Kelly already mentioned, there's a morning and afternoon early childhood session. There was some obviously conversation about before school care and conversations involving the Park District about how that might be able to be worked out. And those are certainly still things that are up for discussion and being considered. One of the common questions that we're also getting is about extracurricular activities. It is our goal to be able to host extracurricular activities in a variety of ways. That could be virtual, that could be some choice in-person meetings. Sports and academic competitions could possibly be an option depending on the guidance that we get from the Illinois Department of Health. To be honest, we're really looking for ways to create that social interaction that kids are so desperately desire, especially our middle school students, and we'll be working to develop those as we go along. So the short answer is yes. The longer answer is we still have some work to do to define exactly what those extracurricular activities will look like and what we'll be allowed to do given the regulations and restrictions that we're under.
Thanks, Nate. Okay, we're going to move into some of the particulars of when our students choose to be in school and what that will look like in terms of safety and health and some of the things that we will need to be doing to make sure that we can keep our school healthy and safe throughout the remainder of this crisis. So this has been a topic of a lot of discussion, and one of the things that we need to make sure that we have in place is a way for us to determine whether or not students are feeling healthy or having any symptoms before they come into school. So we are at this point going to be putting into place a self-certification process where parents will certify that their child is symptom-free. This will be a system that parents will need to be engaging with every day with us, and we are looking at ways that we can utilize technology for that. There's a lot of programs being developed just for this particular purpose. We will be asking parents to answer questions, certifying whether or not the child has a COVID diagnosis, has been in close contact, and we'll define and talk a little bit more about what that means, has been to a hotspot, and those will continue to be identified through our Lake County Health Department, and or exhibit any of the following symptoms. And that will be something that we will be asking parents to do every day. At this point, we are not looking to conduct daily temperature checks, although it is something that we've talked about a lot. One of the things that we have to be careful of is that we need a system for parents to check before students come in close contact with other students. And as we know, we have students who ride the bus, we have students who walk to school together, and we need to have parents involved in checking their child before they get into those situations so that we can ensure that nobody is in close contact before they arrive to us. Now, we know also that if a student begins to develop symptoms in school, that our nurse would obviously be checking temperatures and symptoms and then isolating that student until their parents or guardians can come pick them up. This is something that is going to be difficult for us all to do and for us all to engage in. There's a lot of logistics that go along with monitoring the symptoms, having systems for surveillance, making sure that we're keeping everyone safe. Obviously, if somebody is exhibiting symptoms like we talked about on the previous slide, that does not mean that they have coronavirus. They could be exhibiting symptoms of allergies. They could be exhibiting symptoms of some other sort of illness. So we recognize the need that once those symptoms arise, we need to keep students separated from each other because we don't know what that is, what that ailment might be, and our nurses are not going to be diagnosing or testing at this point. We also know that regardless of whether or not we check temperatures, we also know that students could be asymptomatic and still transmitting the virus, which is why more than even the self-certification and the procedures that we will have in place for identifying and supporting students if they have symptoms, we have some other safety measures that we are going to have in place for anybody who comes into the building. As we know, the State Board of Education has mandated that all students and staff wear face masks or face coverings when they're inside the building, unless there's a medical reason that they cannot wear those. And at that point, we will be talking with the family to determine the right course of action. There may be other types of personal protective equipment that child or staff member could utilize, and that will have to be an individual discussion. We do know that the guidance has shifted. At some point, face masks were were an acceptable option as a face covering. They no longer are. They can be used in addition to a face mask, but they are not an acceptable alternative. We are looking into specialized masks for situations where students would need to see the instructor's face, either for students who are learning English or students who are receiving speech and language therapy. So again, we're looking at personalized and protective equipment that will help facilitate our instruction as well. We will be asking students to bring clean masks to school every day. We will provide 2 for every student. But if there is another preference aside from a cloth mask that is disposable, that is fine for students as well. We'll be looking to help students facilitate mask breaks throughout the day in a safe way. Windows will be opened if they can be, and if a classroom does not have windows, we will be asking students or helping students get outside so that they can take breaks, or out in the hall where there's no one else there. Obviously, we have some instruction here on removing face coverings. We've seen that. Hand hygiene we'll be talking about a lot. We'll be asking students to wash their hands a lot in between, transitioning between activities. And certainly if we need to assist a student with anything. We will not need to wear the face coverings if we're outside unless we can't maintain 6 feet between students. And again, we talked about face shields. So I'm going to move on. We are also have purchased individual plexiglass trifold desk shields. Those look a lot like science experiment, like the science show, but they're clear trifold plexiglass shields that will be either on tables or on desks for students that they would have in front of them in addition to the mask. Again, we've talked about washing hands and using hand sanitizer. We'll be encouraging students who come to school with us to bring water bottles and fill them at the filling stations. We'll be closing off kind of the fountain aspect of water fountains. Again, we'll be asking students to continually wash hands and use hand sanitizer. Jay is going to talk a little bit later about our ventilation systems that are set to increase fresh air when possible. And he'll be talking a little bit about how we're looking to increase our outdoor space as well. We know that there are some classes that are just difficult to facilitate inside. Singing we cannot do inside. We cannot be playing instruments inside, as anyone who knows who has a student that plays an instrument with a spit valve at home like I do. It is not a situation that you want to be having a lot of students indoors these days. And so because we will need to be doing all of these we'll have all these safety precautions in place, and because if there is ever a positive diagnosis or case found, we will have to do contact tracing. We will be keeping track of where students are at all times. We will be using seating charts in every class and every situation so that when we are confronted with a situation where we need to inform families that they've been in close contact with a positive case, that we can inform all the correct families. So that is another safety protocol that will be in place. And I am going to turn it over at this point to Mr. Jay Kahn, who is going to walk us through some of the other safety and hygiene procedures that we have in place for the fall for students who return with us.
Thank you, Dr. Lally. So in order to make sure that our buildings are safe, we are working with our night cleaning contractor on cleaning best practices. There's a company that comes and does the deep cleaning at night. And our day custodians will be walking around the building, wiping down surfaces, and disinfecting and cleaning other areas. We've purchased electrostatic sprayers, which are more effective at disinfecting. We can apply product with better coverage and use less product. It can also, though we are minimizing any soft surfaces, it is effective on both hard and soft surfaces. There will be disinfecting wipes and hand sanitizer in each classroom. We may be repurposing some non-traditional classrooms in order to spread out kids farther apart. And then we will be limiting the community use of our buildings, but should we allow or have any community use, that all the same rules will apply for face masks and social distancing and hygiene. In our classrooms, Dr. Lally mentioned that we will have the trifold plexiglass
Partitions, desks, and tables will be spread apart to 6 feet away from each other. Students will stay in classrooms as much as possible. So we will have a classroom of students, and the teachers will rotate classrooms, or the facilitators, and the students will try to keep the same group of students together all the time to minimize exposure and cross exposure. And as we said, all classrooms will have a seating chart. Students will not be permitted to share supplies, so each student will have their own materials, and areas such as gyms and common areas will be utilized as classrooms. We are also trying to get kids outside. We were looking at erecting some tents while the weather is warm to have classrooms for chorus and band. And then, other instruction, PE will be outside as much as possible as weather permits. But the key is really spacing, signage, to remind people of their good hygiene practices and PPE. Lunch will be in the classroom. Food will be available for pre-purchase through Quest, our food service provider, but it will be pre-purchased. So this is a change for the middle school. Elementary school students already log on and pre-order and pay for their meals. This will also need to occur at middle school. Kids will not be able to go through a line and choose what they want on a given day. All meals will be purchased in advance. And we will likely continue to use push coin at the middle school. Foods will all be prepackaged and individually served. Condiments, silverware, all utensils will be prepackaged and individual. And students will be eating at their desks. So we're cognizant of any kind of allergy or dietary needs. And because students will be eating behind these partitions, they'll be able to remove their masks. They'll be 6 feet apart. And we believe that allergy concerns will be minimized because everyone will sort of be at their own nut-free table, but we'll be working with our nurses and parents on any specialized 504 health plans due to allergies. And then there'll be increased disinfection and cleanup in the rooms after lunchtime. For recess, we've made the decision that playgrounds will be closed. It's very difficult to ensure proper distancing of kids on the playgrounds. We will have some outdoor movement breaks, however, walking, games, and other activities so that kids can get out and remove their masks and move around. And when outdoors, kids can, as long as kids make sure they're physically distanced, they can keep their masks off. For restrooms, we're working on the logistics of bathroom breaks and supervision, but students will have the ability to take bathroom breaks and hand washing breaks. We'll have extra sanitation of the restroom throughout the day. So custodians will be going through and cleaning touch points and areas frequently. There'll be face coverings will be required, and there'll be plenty of signage reminding people to follow these hygiene practices. Same goes for hallways, main offices, and common spaces. We're really looking at spacing, keeping students apart, signage to remind people of what they need to be doing, and having a proper PPE, as well as additional cleaning of high touch points. For gymnasiums and locker rooms, PE classes will be conducted outdoors whenever possible. We will not be changing for PE or using the gym. We'll not be using locker rooms. We'll be physically distancing as much as possible and avoiding sharing of equipment and encouraging frequent hand washing and use of hand sanitizer. We're currently looking at providing kind of wellness activities that can be done at home for students who are remote at home, and then individualized packages of supplies for students so that they can have their own supplies for PE, whether they're remote in school or remote at home. For transportation, as we said, we're trying to reduce the numbers on the buses by encouraging anyone who can stay at home for remote learning to do so, and anyone who comes in and is able to provide their own transportation to do so. If a family needs transportation, we will be spreading out kids on the buses that we have as much as possible and in line with public health guidance. We will likely have staggered drop-off times and locations to ease traffic congestion, as we expect an increased number of car traffic. And we are encouraged carpooling with one other consistent family to, again, minimize congestion. Parents need to complete the health certification for each child every day before putting them on the bus. Masks will be required at all times on the bus. There will be a seating chart on the bus, and there will be hand sanitizer for kids as they get on and off the bus. We are going to be asking a question about transportation when parents make their school in or out of their in school or out of school selection. And we will be giving refunds to parents who have already paid for transportation but elect not to use it. And if parents realize that now they need transportation, we can sign you up and we will not, the fee will be the same.
Thanks, Jay. We're going to turn it back over to Tracy to talk a little bit about how we're handling visitors and specific health issues.
Thanks, Lisa. So in the past, visitors would come into our buildings for a wide variety of reasons. And if you've ever been to one of our main offices, you would know that and agree that they can be very busy places. So visitors this school year will be restricted to authorized personnel only. Visitors to either building must always wear a face covering and report directly to the main office for a wellness screening and a temperature check. Visitors will remain in the office or other designated area for the duration of their visit. So we will be really limiting any movement throughout the building, and visitors will not have general access to the building. Students or staff will be asked to meet the visitor to conduct the business as needed. Keeping in mind that all visitors entering the building will continue to follow the previous sign-in procedures that we had. So these procedures are on top of signing in, showing your ID, and all of those previous protections that we had. So for our health offices, we recognize that our nurses are going to need some support. They're going to be very busy. They will have some big major responsibilities while students and staff are in the buildings. And so we will be soliciting volunteers and hiring temporary additional health staff for each building. All school health offices will follow the ISBE guidelines. People with common health conditions or those who need basic first aid will not report to the health office, but may be managed in a designated classroom or an alternate setting, so that we are not having students with other health needs potentially come in with students who may be sick. Parents or guardians or other authorized individuals should pick up ill students within a reasonable amount of time. And if a student is ill, they will not be able to take the bus home or any public transportation for a return home. So for our confirmed COVID-19 cases, we will follow all the public health guidelines regarding school closure. District 65 will immediately notify local county health officials if we have a confirmed positive diagnosis when it's reported to us. The county health department will assist in contact tracing. Lisa had mentioned before that we would need to be conducting contact tracing, and the Department of Public Health will assist us in determining the appropriate course of action for that. When we identify people as being in close contact, so less than 6 feet away from more than 15 minutes cumulative in the previous 7 to 9 days, masked or unmasked, with the individual who has tested positive, they will be asked to isolate at home and be alert for symptoms for 14 days. Negative COVID tests will not alter the self-quarantine time period. So students or staff self-quarantining with a positive diagnosis will stay home for at least 10 days, given that they were most likely already progressing in the illness prior to the test, and must be fever-free for 72 hours after symptoms have resolved, or have 2 negative COVID tests in a row, with testing at least 24 hours apart. And it's important for everyone to know that specific names of individuals with COVID-19 will never be shared due to medical privacy laws. As any guidance changes from the state or the Illinois Department of Public Health, then these guidelines may also change.
So as you can imagine, there are lots of additional costs related to opening school due to COVID-19, such as the things we've talked about, additional PPE, some of the technology in order to hold remote classes, additional options for space, additional screening and surveillance, and extra staff to handle nursing and custodial duties, et cetera. So we will be budgeting for these costs these COVID-related costs in a different way this year. Typically, we present the board with a budget where each item is presented in its own line item. So there's an accounting structure, and we'll do it as supplies or purchase services. And what I'm proposing that we do this year is we will be budgeting COVID-related costs in one big contingency line item. So we will do a normal budget as if school were normal and everything was normal and happening as usual. And then there'll be one line item, COVID-related contingency. Then each month, the Board of Education will approve the allocation of actual expenses to the appropriate line item. And doing this, the benefits of doing this are, one, increased transparency. So it's very clear what are the normal costs and what costs we've incurred related to COVID-19. And then also there's currently significant uncertainty in budgeting. We have some estimates, but we don't know what and where we're going to be spending these dollars. So this makes it easier to have one lump sum for contingency and then to allocate it as we have more certainty and know what our costs are. And this is a widely accepted practice in state budgeting. Typically, there's a lot more certainty and we're able to budget at the line item level, but this is kind of a rare case. And I think this calls for a different form of budgeting.
Thank you. So again, I want to reiterate that we know, given the nature of this pandemic, that at some point it is likely we will all be remote learning for some period of time. And the advance notice for that, we are not sure how much time we're going to have. And we apologize in advance for that inconvenience that may cause. But we are planning for the fact that we will need to change quickly at times this school year. And so as a team, as an administrative team, we've talked a lot about, what is our change process going to be and how are we going to keep the community, entire community, staff, faculty, parents, board apprised of what changes need to be made. And obviously there's a process for that. There's going to be things that come up. We'll need to understand it, communicate it, prioritize and plan, communicate that plan, implement it, continue to seek feedback as we have been, and then evaluate the results and adjust if we need to. The Return to Learn Task Force, it's been mentioned a couple of times, has been an invaluable resource to our team, and we will continue to meet with them throughout the school year. There are some folks on there who may feel that their time is done now after the heavy lifting that we had to do this summer, and that's fine. We are going to offer some new opportunities for folks if they'd like to join us. But that is a group that will be working through issues as they come up or soliciting and bringing feedback to the team so that we can adjust our plans accordingly for the students, again, who are experiencing learning at home or learning at school. So this is our timeline moving forward. Although this was a lot of information in this presentation, we are actually going to be putting on our website tomorrow the full District 65 Return to Learn plan that I think at this point is about 42 pages long. It will be available on the website tomorrow morning by 9 a.m. It will be a dynamic plan that will be updated regularly, and on the plan we'll notate when something's been updated, kind of bold so that you can see what's been updated. Tomorrow, our building principals and assistant principals will be hosting faculty meetings so that they can talk through some of the things that we've talked about tonight, and more specifically staff concerns and faculty concerns about what this looks like logistically, and start to look at how we can plan together for that. On July 24th, parents will receive a form to indicate your choice for the first trimester. So again, we're asking parents to make a choice, but we are giving 3 opportunities to make that choice. So when we send this form out on the 24th, you are only indicating your choice for the first trimester, and then we'll send the form again, before second trimester and reorganize and give families the opportunity to choose again if their circumstances have changed. So we are going to be asking for a response by July 30th. You would be choosing remote learning either at school or at home. And the flexibility between those two plans, we can allow for parents who have chosen to be with us at school to go remote at any time. We'll be able to accommodate that. However, if parents choose remote, then we are going to need them to stay that way until the next opt-in session, because obviously when we build our class lists and schedules and all of this that we've talked about tonight, all of it is contingent on how many parents decide to have their students with us during the school year, because our ability to space kids far apart, our ability to minimize interactions and make sure that we have everyone safely in the spot they need to be in every day will depend on the numbers. And so if parents choose remote, we're going to ask that they stay there until the second opportunity or the third opportunity to choose to come to school, so that we can reorganize and have some time to plan and make sure everyone is safe. Like we talked about, the Park District will be offering childcare. That will be on the form as well. So parents would be able to indicate if that is something that they would like for each of their children. And they will be we are asking parents to complete a separate form for each child, because we know that there might be different needs for each child. We know this is a lot of information to take in tonight. As Mark talked about before, all the remote return to learn task force meetings are online. They're all recorded, all of our discussions. Those are good resources. Tonight's meeting is a good resource if you have friends that have questions. We will also be hosting a Q&A for parents on July 27th. Time will be listed on the form that goes out on the 24th. That will be with the administrative team and myself to kind of answer questions. That's Monday. So hopefully folks will have time to digest this a little bit and bring their questions for more clarity. And then again, we'll ask that July 30th be when parents respond to us by, and on August 3rd, we will begin to follow up with folks who haven't responded yet so that we can begin our planning. And when we call, there's no need to fill out the form. We will take the choice over the phone. So again, I can't emphasize enough, the plan really depends upon what numbers we get back and how many parents choose to be with us and how many parents choose to do remote learning at home. We know what our original survey data indicated. If it comes back very different and we wind up with an overwhelming majority of parents who want to have their children with us in the fall, we may need to adjust. Just because there are many, many safety issues and precautionary measures that we need to take to make sure that students are safe and staff are safe if they join us to learn in school. So we're nearing the end here, but I do want to really make a point of thanking everyone who has been involved in the development of this plan. First and foremost, our faculty and staff have been on call during their summer break, either serving on a task force formally, serving on their leadership committees, team rep and team facilitators, or just being resources for us to call and run ideas by. Our nurses have been meeting with us since last spring. We've started talking about guidance and ways that we can support them and that we can make sure our schools are safe. Our administrative support staff here at the district office have been working overtime to make sure that we are addressing needs as they come up and answering questions. We've talked about the Return to Learn Task Force, but honestly, if you haven't seen one of those meetings, they've come every week. They've been engaged participants, they've been prepared ahead of time, and they've honestly been a great springboard for us to make sure that we're addressing the questions. I've been able to meet with community partners. I've been in close contact with Lake Forest, District 67 and 115. Our plans are similar. There are some areas where we're different. Some of our plan just depends on the logistics of our own districts, but they've been very helpful and accommodating, and we've talked a lot. Parents and community, if you've reached out with questions, if you've watched a remote learning task force, if you've emailed us, any of us to provide your input, we appreciate it. We hear you. We know this is hard and challenging, and we want to work with you. Board of Education, obviously, I can't thank you enough for your support as you welcomed me into this district. And finally, I would be remiss in saying this is an amazing administrative team. 5 of the 7 administrative team members in your district are new to their positions. Tracy has done an amazing job transitioning in as our Director of Student Services. She's taken on more than I could imagine that she would have taken on at this point, but she's in there in the game the whole time. Kelly, we know I already talked about transitioning roles. Audrey and Joe are on the call today, our new assistant principals. They've been either Zooming into meetings with us or joining us for meetings this whole summer. And so in addition to me being new, we've pulled together as a team, and I believe that we've tried to create a good, solid plan for us to move forward and to create an engaging and effective experience for our kids in the fall that moves them forward in their academics, that keeps them safe and healthy emotionally and physically, and that supports our community with their needs. So with that, I will open it up to questions.
I'll start. Dr. Leali, in the beginning of your presentation, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you said something to the effect that after lots of consideration, you were recommending that most families choose the at-home option. And could you elaborate a little bit more on why that was the recommendation at the end of the day?
Sure, absolutely. So again, what we've talked about a lot as an administrative team is that we know that there will be times when individuals or classrooms will need to quarantine for long periods of time. As Tracy talked about, we are not talking about a couple of days. And we are not talking about only self-quarantine positive diagnosis. We're talking about the definition of close contact. Close contact, that definition has evolved since the spring. And as Tracy talked about, that is less than 6 feet for more than 15 minutes cumulative over a time period, masked or unmasked. So when we talk about students or individuals who are in close contact, that's a lot of people. And the potential for having to have folks in self-quarantine for long periods of time is high. And we also know that there is potential for us to move into a remote learning platform as a full district. And so our goal is to create a consistent system and a consistent structure for students that may need to move between these two platforms. And for us, remote learning feels like the best option. And we want to put our energy into developing a remote learning platform that is robust, that is effective, that is engaging for kids, and that can support kids in moving seamlessly between either in school if they choose to be with us or when they need to be at home. And not only for our students, but also for our staff. We recognize that our teachers and students have to form relationships. There's got to be a consistency there, or we're not going to be able to achieve the outcomes we need to achieve and support students the way we need to support them. So if as much consistency as we can create, that was our goal. Again, the other issue on the other side of it was the less students that we have in the building, the farther apart we can keep them. The more that we can rely upon our staff to enforce safety procedures with fidelity, to correct with fidelity, there's going to be a lot of eyes on and watching and correcting. We know our little ones are going to have a hard time with some of these things. I have two children under the age of 10. It's hard for them to stay away from friends and to not interact. I know it would be hard for them right now to not run up and give their teacher a hug if they saw him on the street right now. Even my 15-year-old, has trouble remembering about face masks and distancing. So there's going to be a lot of work on the part of our teachers when students join us in school to make sure that they're staying safe. And that is our goal. Ultimately, at the end of the day, that is our top priority. And so we want to make that remote learning platform engaging and effective enough so that that can be our consistent, most effective program for our families this year.
Thank you. I appreciate the update.
Dr. Leali, could you expand a bit on the hybrid option? I know you mentioned both at the remote learning or back to return to learn committee meetings again tonight that hybrid may or may not be an option. Can you talk about what kind of data we're looking for to decide if that is the third option that parents will get, and if so, how that might work?
So on the form, we'll be asking parents to choose either at home or in-person instruction. And then there will be a place for parents to indicate if they would like to be contacted regarding a hybrid schedule. So for example, if I want to send my children Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I want to keep them home Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays to limit exposure, that may be an option. What we would be looking for is the breakdown of where people fall out. How many chose in person? How many chose to stay at home? If we have enough spaces and we can keep kids physically distanced enough, then we may be able to accommodate hybrid schedules at some grades. I don't know that we'll be able to do it at every grade. It really is going to depend on how the parents elect and what their choices are, and how much distance we can keep between students utilizing the spaces that we have.
Thanks.
First of all, I want to thank everyone for a very comprehensive and thoughtful overview and process. It was a lot of information. It was all helpful and great, so thank you for that. A couple of questions here. First of all, you have mentioned this tipping point of how many people elect to be in school remote and have this model work. What is that?
So we initially were looking at about 20 to 25% of folks opting into remote learning at any given time. That will be challenging for us at times to maintain 6 feet. In some of our spaces, that's going to be challenging for us. It's not to say it's not doable, but obviously the less amount of kids that we have in school, the more ability that we will have to be able to keep them apart and to space them out in school. So our threshold is about 20 to 25%. But the more that we have at home, the better it will be for us in school.
Do you think that the district's going to be able to achieve that naturally, that 20 to 25% or less? Or do you expect that we'll be having to turn people away? Is there a sense of where the community is landing?
That's a great question. So when we initially did our first survey, and I forget, it was like in June, early June, the breakdown was about 60% of our families that said that they would be sending all of their children to school in person. About 35%, 30 to 35% said that they're not sure. They were on the fence, they need more information. And about 5 to 10% were saying, I'm keeping them home until phase 5. So what I would say is that 40% is the play that we have. I've gotten some emails over the past, since then, we know, like kind of Mark indicated, a month in COVID time feels like a lot more time than that. And I've gotten some emails from parents who really felt like they were worried that that first survey was going to lock them into coming to school and they wanted to elect out. So those are the emails that I've received changing opinion. It hasn't gone the other way, if that makes any sense. I haven't received emails saying I indicated I'm going to be remote and now I'll be sending them. It's gone the other way. So I feel like based on that and the talk, the news, where we're seeing other districts go, how we're seeing the uptick in cases, I would say we'll probably achieve that goal of 25 to 30% naturally. Yes.
And how does our compare K through 8?
That's a good question. So high schools, I've seen more starting out remote. There's a lot of logistics and complexities to a high school schedule that we don't experience here. I would say the majority of K through 8 districts that are like ours are offering a choice of either in person or remote, and then basing their plans off of that. Our plan is pretty close to that. The only difference really with our plan is that we would like to put our time and energy into really developing that remote platform and not focus a lot of time on designing something different for the kids who are with us in school, because we have a small staff. We have a very, very dedicated staff. As the first public comment indicated, we have an exceptional staff. And I want to focus their efforts to make sure that what we're delivering to our parents, regardless, all year long, is high quality. And knowing that we're going to be in and out, anybody could be in and out at any given time. That is the platform that I'd like to put our energy into.
2 more questions. I'm curious, under law, what would be the most permissive return to policy that we have? And how does this plan, how far off from that most permissive return?
Permissive meaning not in accordance with the guidance, or?
I mean, I presume that there's legal limits on us saying, hey, everybody come back. We're just going to do it as normal, do it out. I presume that's not an option that's available to us. How does our plan align with the most permissive normal return that we do?
So I would say that our plan is more conservative in terms of us adhering to guidance, because we're really trying to get the least amount of students back to school that can handle it. Aside from saying we're going remote, right, for everybody, what we're actually saying is we know there's some families who can do it, and so we will support them with the best program. We know there's some families who cannot, and we in turn will also support them in school. the ability to have less kids in class, less kids in school, that will allow us to adhere to the guidance more strictly, which is what we want to do. You know, there is some vagueness to the guidance, you know, because physical distancing, for example, the goal is 6 feet, but there is some wiggle room in there. And as we know, there's been different opinions about whether or not 3 to 6 feet is acceptable, or whether or not we should all be going for 6 feet. I mean, as this evolves and as our knowledge evolves about the virus, and we're seeing that, you know, kids can transmit, kids can contract the virus. We've heard about, you know, terrible cases of students, you know, having inflammatory syndrome and other health conditions that could have long-term effects. We'd really like to adhere to the stricter guidance if we can. And again, still offer the choice to support parents with what they feel like will be best for their student, and for their family.
Okay, so if I just try to distill this to the bottom line, then what I'm hearing is that we could have we could invite, let's say 60% of people still wanted to come back, have their kids come back. We could legally accommodate that.
Yes.
We're choosing. Okay, and then let me ask you about the academic achievement. I mean, what is the, you know, expectation with remote learning that I mean, do we think there's going to be slippage in what we're going to be able to accomplish this year?
So as Kelly talked about, you know, we were operating under very different guidance in the spring, we across the state and probably across the country, but our state board was very, very clear. No harm done. You know, we know that this is turning people's lives upside down. Our accountability was, our ability to keep kids accountable was lessened. We really needed to kind of like support kids and give them lots of chances and not be putting a ton of pressure on people. So I would say that given that time period and that we were a little bit looser on how we were doing things, there are some students who really probably suffered some loss. You know, there are probably students that maintained and stayed with us and engaged with everything we were doing and even went, you know, above and beyond at times. So there's going to be a range of what the experience was in the spring. There's also going to be a range of what the experience has been this summer. You know, we know that we have some parents who are going to be doing some things over the summer, reading every day, you know, engaging with, you know, basic foundational skills and things like that. We know there are some on the other end that are not able to do that or not wanting to do that. There's some that are creating really great experiences for the kids this summer. So assessment is key for us. When we get back in, you know, we have a team working now that'll be working in the next couple of weeks once we figure out where our classes are going to be and what the percentages in and out are going to be to develop a plan to effectively assess. We need to assess. And we need to be doing that universally at the beginning. We need to be doing it at benchmarks as we have done it. And we need to be doing it in our curriculum and content courses and trying to support regardless of what the student's experience was in the spring or the summer. So do I anticipate was probably some learning loss? Yes. But I also think we will have students who will be ready to move on. And our goal again is different. We're going to be moving on with new content. We're going to be covering the same content in and out and staying really consistent with the program we offer for our students.
Okay, one more clarification, maybe I missed it, but what if we do get a higher percentage of people who want to come back than what we're hoping? The indicators are that won't be a problem. What if it is? We do.
If it is, we're going to have to evaluate and see if there's a different plan that we need to put into place. I don't see us having to do that. But if we wound up, say, with 90% of our students that wanted to come back and do school with us in school, we may have to consider somewhat of a bigger hybrid model where we have some kids coming in some days and then operating remotely other days so that, again, we can keep that physical distance and keep safety measures in place. The other thing I want to emphasize is it's not just about student choice and student illness. We will be losing staff. You know, we will have staff. We have staff now that have medical conditions that are not going to be able to join us in person. We have staff and family members who may be falling ill. We will have positive contacts. We will have contact tracing that we will have to do, and we will have self-quarantining that we will have to do with our staff. As you know, we've already experienced a sub shortage. Here in Lake Bluff, we were experiencing it where I came from. You know, this plan allows us for some flexibility with subbing staff members because we will be sort of co-teaching and team teaching and taking accountability and ownership for all students at a grade level as a team. Because once that domino starts, it's not just where students are, it's what the tipping point is for us in terms of staffing and what we can handle in the building in terms of supervision. So there's two sides to the equation, and yes, enrollment is one and choice, but the other is we're not really sure, how we're going to be impacted in terms of human resources.
I have a question more related to logistics than anything else. First, I'd like to commend you and your staff, administration, everyone for putting together a very thorough plan and allowing individual households to make choices on their own. I think that's important. Logistically, though, we've got roughly 850 students, and every day you're indicating that the parent has to certify their wellness in some fashion. I'm trying to visualize how that's going to work. Is there going to be an app that's they fill out and complete? Who's going to monitor it? What happens if it's not finished? What can a kid shows up at school and his parent hasn't certified wellness? So maybe you can clarify that a little bit.
I'm wondering if you've been spying on our administrative team meetings. These are all the questions that we've been tossing around. There's a lot that goes along with self-certification. To your point, it will probably be an app. It will probably be something hopefully that's easy for parents to do in terms of checking the boxes. When we will need to set up a deadline for parents to self-certify so that we can run the report of parents who did certify and those who did not. We would like to have a reminder for parents when they say, no, my child has symptoms, that they need to call in and, create an absence. We will need to follow up with families who don't certify prior to the start of the school day. It's really, it is a puzzle because we will need to get those lists to our bus drivers. We are still working through, what do? We have an obligation. When a student goes to the bus stop, if a parent sends them to the bus stop and they have not certified, what does our bus driver do at that point? Because we may not be able to send them home to their home. They might not be supervised at that time. So again, when we consider whether or not we should be taking temperatures or self-certifying, that self-certification piece is crucial for us because we need parents to get involved and be honest with us if their children are experiencing symptoms. We are on the honor system here. We need to work as a community to keep each other safe. And this is the plea to do that. We will again be following up and doing double checks and triple checks when students exhibit any kind of symptom at school. But the first piece is parents. We're relying on parents to do that, some of that work for us and to keep our community safe.
So I have another one, and this I'm primarily asking this as a parent. And having been a part of the Return to Learn, I've had the privilege of kind of seeing this evolve. And as we got into kind of this coming week where we started to call this, remote learning versus facilitated in-person learning is slightly different than just in-person learning in a classroom. So I guess my question is, as a parent, as someone and other parents are listening who are going to be trying to make a careful decision over the next week or so, how do we, I guess the question is, how can we ensure that the remote experience is going to be, I think robust is the word you've used, which is a good word. I know that's the goal. How can we try to have that same connection with the teacher that they may have had in a non-facilitated in-person, but in a true in-person experience? And I know that's not easy and there may not be an easy answer, but as we're trying to make a decision, I know at least for my own family, I'm thinking that's significantly different than kind of the plan that was in place a week or so ago. And I'm just curious how administration and teachers are going to do that.
So one piece is consistency. So as we've talked about, we're going to try to keep that relationship, those teachers that are with the students, consistent as much as we can. Obviously, there's going to be substitute issues and things like that. But with the students who choose to be with us in person, there will be a consistent person with them in school and a consistent person that they would interact with online. And then when we all go remote, those two folks will hopefully, if they're not able to, would be also consistent online for them in that phase 3. So building that relationship and that trust is key. The other piece, as Kelly talked about, when we look at Innate, talking about scheduling that day out and having synchronous learning throughout the day. What we heard in terms of feedback was that, some kids were done by 9 o'clock. They got their independent learning or 10 o'clock and they kind of flew through it. And then they had the rest of the day to hang out and do what they wanted to do, which, it's probably great for them. But again, what we're trying to do is create a consistent connection all day so that it feels more like a scheduled school day. There's more face-to-face interaction with consistent people. to provide the support that the student needs as they work through the various subject matter, and also allow for some time to check in with their peers. You know, we did that sometimes, I think, in the spring. This is a daily check-in now, you know, for kids to connect with each other, to connect with their teachers, to talk about how they're feeling and how this is working for them, so that we're going to be using that synchronous platform just like we are now, in a little bit more of a consistent and scheduled way, so that we keep kids moving through the day at a pace that they're used to. And then that same pace and schedule will be happening in person when they're with us at school. And so when those students who are in school have to shift to that remote learning platform, it feels the same. You know, the cadence feels the same, and the schedule feels the same. They're just in a different place, but with the same people. So that is the goal. And we know those relationships are important. We know that consistency is important, that ability to connect. And that's why creating that platform that's really more well-rounded and well-developed in terms of connection is really important for us to focus on.
Thank you. So I have one more about buildings. I think in Jay, when you were speaking now, we said I think we were going to limit the use of our buildings to the public, but I think in the 42-page supplementary document, I know we talked about this at the remote learnings, we said we were going to shut that down for community usage, and I was just wondering where we settled on that, because I would be much more in the camp of shutting the building down to any non-essential use. Just clarifying that might be helpful, what the decision was.
I mean, I think I don't want to absolutely say nobody can ever use our buildings. For example, Mark had mentioned that the school board elections are coming up, and I know that Vote Lake Bluff has asked to use our building in December. I don't know what it's going to look like at that time. That might be the type of function that we may decide should be using our building. And if we do in fact open it for that, then we would want to make sure that everybody was safe and we took any precautions. I don't think we'll be scheduling plays or, normal athletic activities or things like that. But we want to limit it and keep it on a case-by-case basis without absolutely saying positively no use of the building. But that's the direction that we would lean, is to try to avoid using our building for other purposes just because of the situation.
And the other piece, we've had teachers reach out. I mean, our teachers here are amazing. They're already reaching out, like, is there going to be any way that we can have parents come in and see work if kids have it from being in school, to create that connection. So again, teachers are looking for that. They want to make that happen, as much as we can. So to Jay's point, we just don't want to shut it down right now.
Lisa, I have one more question. Even though my children are no longer in the program in the school, trying to put my parent hat and envision what this looks like. And from what I'm hearing is, it does not sound like some of the modern approaches to education and the direction that education has been taking over the past 5-10 years will really be part of this plan. I'm wondering if you and your team have thought about opportunities or ways to move forward with modern educational thinking. And the one thing that jumps to mind really quickly is all the collaboration kids do in classes now. We rebuilt that whole middle school to facilitate collaboration. And now we're going to have a very industrial approach to education that, to me, sounds like it's going to look like something from the 1950s. Sit in a row, eat at your desk, have a trifold in front of you, limited conversation, limited socialization. Have you and the teachers thought about ways to incorporate a more modern approach to learning, given all the restrictions you're facing?
So I'm going to let the principals chime in on this, or assistant principals if they'd like, Tracy or, Jay, anyone who wants to. Yes, we've thought through, Jay and I walked through the building with some teacher leaders. Michelle Grady, it was gracious enough to walk through the buildings with us and talk through some of the logistical issues in terms of our classrooms and furniture. And it was heartbreaking. The buildings are beautiful. They have been renovated for innovative instruction and collaborative, discussion and facilitation of amazing learning. And I am sure that that is happening on a regular basis here. And so when we think about what this is going to look like, that's really, really different. And it's difficult for us as educators to even envision doing school like that in a place like this with a community like this that is used to that kind of high level and high quality instruction. So that is something we're thinking through. Again, I'm going to let the principals or other administrators chime in, but
I'll give it a shot. You know, one of the things that throughout this process I've had to do is to come to grips with the limitations that we're acting within, but at the same time consider it an opportunity to innovate in ways that we never have before. Nothing's off the table. Think of things that you've never considered before in education, and we have a staff that does that, and I'm fully they're going to do it. They're going to find ways to enable that for their kids. And to be very honest, you know, maybe there's some changes in education that we see carrying forward as a result of this. I'm hoping that there's some silver lining to be had here. But certainly I couldn't tell you exactly how it would look. I think a lot of our staff is going to experiment with some different ways to engage with their kids and find out that, oh boy, this is something I hadn't considered before and it really works. And I'm going to continue to do it even when this thing is all over and we're back in classroom in a traditional sense. So being willing to try something new and different is going to be the name of the game, in my opinion.
I can add on from my perspective. Also, I think Lisa used the word heartbreaking, and that is definitely something that we have felt throughout. And the more conversations you engage in, the more experiences and moments you sort of realize and recognize, like, oh, it's not going to look like that, or it's not going to feel like that, or our students won't be able to do that. And so the word reimagine is one that we're using constantly and consistently. So we need to really reimagine our learning spaces. And we've done that and are doing that as an administrative team and as we engage in conversations with students and parents. I'd like to acknowledge that I had numerous conversations with staff members throughout our district across my time here. And there are so many experiences where staff has said, like, I've really shifted my thinking and I'm never looking back. Or, you know, wow, this really felt amazing and I want to keep doing that. And I'd like to think that because we're on that path, we're going to have to adjust. We're going to have to take some hard rights or hard lefts or sort of pause. But we have such a solution-seeking district and staff. And I know as a lifelong learner, experiences that I have engaged in in the spring and throughout summer are causing me in learning situations as I'm sort of an observer in a course to say, oh my gosh, look what they just did there. How could that look in our schools? The breakout rooms on Zoom are one place where I think we really want to emphasize some learning and education and understanding about making that a dynamic learning space, because it is going to have to look different. And Mark, you're absolutely right. Those 21st century learning skills are not COVID friendly. And we know that we're going to have to think differently. So it's on our minds, and I'm looking forward to continuing to problem solve.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I just wanted to jump in and say that even though I'm new to Lake Bluff, you know, I was an administrator previously, and we did see a lot of students engage and respond differently to the remote learning. There were students who were kind of struggling in the classroom, and then the remote opportunity, they suddenly turned around and were very engaged and, you know, progressing very well. Whereas we saw other students who, when taken out of the classroom, weren't as successful with the remote style of learning. So you have to remember every student is kind of a different learner. So the more personalized we can offer, personalized opportunities we can offer these students is super important, because some kids do learn best, you know, in person and need that style and type of, you know, teaching.
So maybe one of the silver linings is this will force advanced thinking on individualized curriculum, which is something that's been talked about for years and years and years, and it's been hard to materialize. And maybe this will shorten the pipeline on the development of that.
Well, and I remember when I was looking at Lake Bluff, there was a great, and I was just trying to find it. I think it's like a frequently asked questions about how you've moved to standards-based reporting and grading. I mean, this is a great opportunity for our teachers to kind of really dig in and assess where the students are and how they're going and not limit them. So if they are continuing to progress, you know, with maybe a lot of support at home, or this is just kind of a good style for them and they've been able to really hit a pattern and move forward, we don't have to stop them. We can continue to move forward. And our teachers are going to be working together and collaborating, you know, because we also have to, like we've said before, kind of assess where they're at. And then we're going to have to kind of adjust and pivot. So we continuously are bringing the kids forward and not necessarily pausing anybody where they're at with their learning. You know, some kids will excel in certain areas and maybe struggle in others. So it's important that we keep that fluid and open so that, again, they can continue to, you know, make progress, you know, at their own pace and personalize that. And you can see a lot of companies like Google and, you know, a lot of these other companies, I mean, they're all in this same boat where they're at home now. So the whole world is kind of adjusting and moving with this and, you know, discovering new things. So I think there's going to be a lot of silver linings that we'll start to see. And I really appreciate you bringing that up. I think it's a good point.
Dr. Lealy, I like something you said. Oh, you go ahead, Julie. I'll go next.
No, I think I'm going to start going in different directions. So you go first, please.
Okay, I'll be quick. I would say, Dr. Lealy, I like what you said before about, you know, the less people that we have in the building, the more likely it is we can space people out and keep all our students healthy. And I know as a parent, I find comfort in that. Relatedly, I know the ISB guidelines, I think, require that we do the self-certifications. That's great. I'm guessing the reason that we're choosing to not, or at least right now, choosing to not take temperatures as they come in, is that simply manpower, logistic type thing, or what's sort of the rationale behind that?
So let me talk a little bit more about the logistics of taking temperature. So one of the first kind of roadblocks we have to that is, how do we do that before kids come into close contact with each other? So if we were going to perform temperature checks and we were going to take that responsibility as a school, we would need to do that before they come in close contact with each other, which means staffing a bus with somebody who would be able to step off the bus and take a temperature before the child comes on the bus with us. There's a few issues with that. Obviously, you know, weather related issues. Right now, it's very hot outside. If a student is sweating and standing in the heat, we might not get an accurate temperature. If the student fails the screening at that point, part of that is, again, what do we do at that point? You know, because to send a young child home that might not be supervised is also something that we would have to be very careful with. Again, we have students who walk to school together. You know, we want parents to be cognizant and thinking of that. We cannot go out and proactively take a temperature check on those students, but that would be part of that contact tracing, you know, all those contacts. We want to try to keep people as safe as possible. Once they get with us in school, you know, there are some logistics to work out there too, because obviously health records are private. And so we would need to develop a system where we could take temperatures privately and talk, you know, and kind of move kids into the nurse's office or another place if they happen to fail the screening and we needed to do a second test. Because we know how kids are, and we would want to maintain as much privacy as possible so that when somebody is whisked out of line and brought down to the nurse's office, that doesn't become communicated, that doesn't get communicated all through the grade or the school. So that's not to say that we aren't doing, you know, considering other ways and trying to work through some of those logistics, but either way, whether or not we can or cannot do that part on our own, we do believe it's really important for parents to certify health before they set the student out on their path for the school day to join us, because we need them to be partners with us in that.
Thank you for clarifying that.
And that is just that students can not have a temperature and still have COVID-19. So we feel like checking all those other symptoms is a better, more well-rounded approach than just relying on temperature by itself.
Yeah, and I wasn't suggesting it should be one or the other. I was asking why we're not doing both, just to clarify. But thank you for clarifying, Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
Julie, you had a question, I think, that kind of got scrambled before.
I was going to ask, first of all, if we still have a number of people on the line to make public comment, because I am very curious about how the parents are going to react to that. And I was going to start by asking the two parents on the school board for their sense of this and where they're landing on it. So I would just ask Andy and Ann to give their perspective.
Well, I'll tell you how I'm feeling, which has been, I think, like a lot of parents, a myriad of emotions over the last few weeks thinking about this, right? And with this change in the plan today that I learned about, with the remote learning being the focus and platform, my husband and I are going to keep our kids home. That's what we've decided to do. I don't think there is necessarily, one choice better than the other. Every family has to make the choice that works best for them. We are able to keep them home. And so I feel like having that remote learning piece being what everyone's focusing on, that's going to be what's best for us. I'm really sad about the lack of socialization. I'm sad that they can't go back. But when I think about it, I'm most sad that they can't go back to normal school. Right. And that's just not an option right now. And so I think we have more flexibility to get them outside, to get exercise and do socialization in different ways, however that's going to look, and still have a good educational experience remotely.
Yeah, and I'll say something similar. I think, first of all, and I hope this is clear, I have 100% confidence in this administrative team and the team that put the plan together and has been working very hard on this. So thank you to all of you. I would be 100% confident in the remote learning plan, because I know that, with more live instruction, it's going to be a completely different experience in the spring. I totally get that. And I will also feel confident in the safety of my children in school with this plan. I will say, though, the pivot from where we were last week to this week has changed our discussion in our family as well. We were very strongly leaning towards keeping them in school because we thought for socialization and one of our children in particular, that would be the smarter way to go. But this pivot to having the experience just be facilitated rather than actually, going through a real learning experience in the building does change that for us. And we still have some discussions to have as a family, but I think I do appreciate the rationale behind it, which is why I've asked a lot of questions. And I think much of that is understandable. So I'm in no different position than any other parent that's listening tonight or will listen tomorrow. It's an emotional time. It's a hard time. And like Ann said, I miss the normal, but we all miss the normal, and we'll get back there. But I do appreciate the work that's gone into making this a plan that really does speak to the mission and vision of our district, and focusing on a platform that we genuinely believe will probably, like it or not, be spending the majority of the year in. So, so thanks for asking the question, Julie.
Anybody else have questions? I'm going to propose, if there's no further questions from the board, I'm going to propose that we move the comment section from the very end of the meeting to right now, because I think nobody's going to have questions about our consent agenda that we vote on later on. So if it's okay with you, if nobody has any other questions or comments, I'm going to ask Shelley to open up the floor for public comment. And I'll remind people before they speak that we're going to try to limit it to 5 minutes a person, and to state your name and address before you start. So go ahead, Shelley.
Right now we have 4 in line, and I'm going to start with Samantha Borland. All right, Samantha, you can go ahead. Samantha, are you able? Can you unmute?
There you go.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do not have a question. I don't know. My son must have raised my hand. Sorry. Great job,
Okay.
everyone.
No problem. Okay.
Next.
Okay, Brittany Dressler.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I lost the video, but I can still hear you guys. Thank you. My name is Brittany Dressler. I'm at 217 East Sheridan Place. I have a upcoming second grader in the school district. And I have 3 questions / comments or things to maybe for the team to discuss at the upcoming meetings. My first question or comment is, and if I heard you guys right, it mentioned that there was going to be more live teaching with coming up in the fall versus what we saw in the spring with more video type of recorded segments, but not necessarily in things like the science and the social studies. And I was just wondering if there would be chances to reconsider just sometimes doing some of that more live. I think, and maybe it's for the younger kids, and I know they have shorter attention spans, but I think the live is fantastic. My daughter right now is over the summer been taking an art class once a week through Zoom, and just to see the interaction there, it lasts 2 hours and she's just glued to it the whole time, versus I felt like I was wrestling her every day just to watch the 2 or 3 minute segments that would be on her reading or her math assignments, and she did them and she did them well. But I think seeing someone live and being able to learn versus how they did some of the kind of Zoom classroom meet and greets, and those were fun. Those were a great way to get the kids together. But I think we need to maximize as much as possible actual teacher teaching versus kind of more of the recorded segments if possible. And I know you're the experts and I appreciate everything that's gone into all this, but I just throw that comment out there for a little bit of consideration. My second question / comment is I haven't heard mentioned in the meetings here, but I've seen a lot of stuff online, whether it here locally or even nationally, about pod type of learning. And maybe not necessarily in the classroom, but if there were small groups of 2 or 3 kids that wanted to do a remote kind of pod learning, would you give the students the option to let you guys know that, so they could be placed with the same teacher, so they could kind of be doing that learning together as a small pod offsite, so they're kind of still in the same little cohort. I don't know if that was up for consideration or something the group could discuss as well to consider. And one more question comment here is, what is the cutoff to shut down the school when we see cases? So I heard the discussion about when there is a positive case and there will be some contact tracing and anyone that's been in contact directly with that student. But that sounds like it's maybe more of a one-off or one here, one there. Is there a limit where we say there's X number reported in the school or in the district that we need to close the school or close the district? What is that discussion? And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. We have Erin Jocelyn. Okay, Erin, you're ready.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Erin Jocelyn, I'm at 217 Ascot. First, let me just say, I can't imagine the number of hours you have thought about all of this, so I appreciate all your time and energy. I'm sure it's been endless and frustrating at times, so God bless all of you for your time. I work in corporate America. I'm working on similar initiatives, obviously with adults. What this call has helped me to see is sort of the upside of the remote learning. Couple things. One, you can't see people with the mask on, so you can't see the kids with the mask on. Teacher can't see the kids can't see the teacher's faces unless they have them off. So to me, that's a huge loss, not to be able to see people. The socialization is going to be limited as far as I can tell. And the sort of concept that we use in corporate America called like hoteling, right, where you come into an office not to meet or collaborate, but to simply have a space to work, is what it sort of feels like to me. So So definitely helped to make the case for some of us, I think, to lean towards at home, remote. So that, I guess that was just some highlights that I took away from this call. I think I liked what Brittany said around the pods and socialization. I will tell you, my son is a sophomore at Lake Forest High School, and he has been in the U.S. history online learning. And he has struggled in school for a long time. It has been the most phenomenal experience ever. His grades are outstanding. He's engaged. He's learning on a regular basis. He's socializing outside. So he goes and connects with people after class. He's met more people this way. And so I just want to plug that I think that there are lots of benefits to this way of working. There is a silver lining to be found. So that's my experience. I'm sure I know and understand that kids can struggle, but I have a kid that struggled, and now this has been a great solution. So kudos to your thoughts around the remote learning. My one question, I guess, would be, have you considered, and this is sort of what Brittany said, online for certain classes and in person for others? And what I mean by that is more of the science and the math or the tactical types of classes. And would there be potentially a solution whereby, learning around English or history would be more remote, whereby the sciences, maths, things that require maybe more visual stuff would be in person? So that was all. Those were a couple of my insights and highlights. And again, I thank you for all your time and energy.
Thank you very much.
Okay. We have Joy Marquis. All right, go ahead, Joy.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Joy Marquis, 117 West Blodgett. So I just had a couple of things. This is, like I said, I had been watching the Return to Learn videos. So this was definitely a pivot from the last meeting that I watched. I guess I just had a question about if you're in school and you're doing remote learning and you've got a facilitator there, that's not actually going to be the teacher teaching the class. Is the teacher teaching the class someplace else then, doing a Zoom meeting that you're watching? And are the teachers actually going to be in the building, or are they going to be at home? I guess that's kind of what I was wondering, from just what the feel in the building would be like. And then my second question had to do with when we looked at the schedule for the middle school, and it said, 300 minutes for math, some of that asynchronous, some of that synchronous. I'd love to see some guidelines on how much will be synchronous and how much will be asynchronous, because it felt like in the spring that was we were in a very different situation then, right? Because everything was new, but that was kind of just determined by the teacher. So I would love to see some general overall guidelines, like if we're going to do 300 minutes of math, 200 minutes of that needs to be synchronous, 100 minutes has to be asynchronous, so that it's more consistent across the board for the kids. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Joy.
Sure.
All right, next up, Jose Avalos.
Hi, how are you? Hold on, my wife needs to mute her computer so you don't hear the echo. Okay. All right, so my question is about, oh, sorry, I said I live at 618 Smith Avenue. So my question would be, when students, we are a two-parent working home, and we have to consider sending our kids to school because there's no other choice to not sending them. So my question would be, when you reach the threshold, I think about the 25% it was, or whatever the number or percentage of students was that for the class or per classroom? And I'm just wondering how you're figuring out the square footage of each classroom when students return. Do you need, like, how is that going to work out? Before or after students or parents say when their kids are, what option they're going to choose? I'm just wondering about social distancing inside the classroom and how much space you actually need and how much space you actually will have, and what happens to those students that are like in that classroom that have too many students. That's it.
Thank you.
It looks like that's it, Mark.
Oh, okay, great. Well, we appreciate any other written comments?
Not at this time.
Great. Well, we appreciate all the comments and thank you everybody for watching. So we're going to move on. We now have a discussion and presentation by Mr. Khan on special education transportation.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
How will people get replies to the questions that were asked?
So that's a good question. I have them down, and what we will probably do is in the next couple of days add those to the frequently asked questions. So the document that we are going to be posting online tomorrow morning has a frequently asked questions section. We may pull it out and make it a separate website so that we can keep that going with the questions that we receive, but we will address those questions as soon as we can on that document.
Great.
Thank you. Jay, you want to do your presentation?
So what you have in your board packet is a memo from a consultant. Lake Forest School District 67, 115, and Lake Bluff School District went out and did a joint request for proposal for special education transportation. And in order to look for companies that could provide service, basically the best service and at the lowest price. When you're doing a transportation request, it's not just a straight bid process where you're looking at price alone, but it is your decision over who you use is based on many factors, price being only one of them. Also past experience, references, and capabilities. And then also given the COVID-19 pandemic, we're also looking for some additional safety precautions and things that we'd like our companies to provide, as well as insurance requirements and things like that. So we did this joint RFP, collected lots of submissions, many of which are from companies that we have used in the past. And the recommendation there was to continue to use the companies that we've used. They are all providing very good service. Their references checked out very well. And they have demonstrated that they can keep our children safe and take the types of safety measures that we need them to under the new, more rigorous situation. So this was preliminary work that was done, and I'm just bringing it to you to bring to your attention, and so you can see the process that we went through. We are able to, after going through this process, sign a 3-year contract with each company. And then after that, we can sign a 2-year contract. And then after that, we can go year to year with each one. So in a future meeting, I will be bringing individual contracts drafted by our attorney with each of these companies based on the RFP and the requirements that we've set out in the RFP. And then we'd be asking for your approval on those contracts at that time. Most likely next meeting in August, because we'll need to start using them right away this fall.
Any other questions from Mr. Khan? Okay, so we'll move on to our action items, which will be brief. Our first action item is the personnel report. And this month's personnel report includes 2 resignations. Nicole Wittern, teaching assistant at the elementary school, effective June 26th of 2020. The reason given was for school. And also resignation of a Sydney Walden, a teaching assistant at the elementary school effective July 8th of 2020 for another job opportunity. The personnel report also includes a non-licensed change of assignment. Andrea Fuentes will be a secretary. She was a teaching assistant. She's replacing Connie Arias at the elementary school. This is effective for the upcoming school year at $18 an hour. And then we also have a non-licensed new hire, an Andrea DiCanio. I apologize if I butchered that name. Teaching assistant at the middle school, replacing David Pookie for the 2021 school year at $15 an hour. Are there any questions or comments or concerns about that personnel report? Not hearing any. May I have a motion to approve the personnel report for July 21st, 2020 as presented by the administration?
So moved.
Second.
Leanne, can we have a roll call?
John Marsden?
John, you're muted.
Unmute, John.
Yes.
Thank you. Charlotte, yes. Gotchall?
Yes.
Haig?
Yes.
Duran?
Yes.
Hill?
Yes.
Barry?
Yes. That's it. The motion's passed. Thank you. Our final item for the night, item B, is the consent agenda. And this month's consent agenda includes the P-card report, the bills report, the impressed report, the treasurer's report, the open session meeting minutes for June 9th, 2020, the regular Board of Education meeting, the open session meeting minutes for the June 23rd, 2020 special Board of Education meeting. It includes the closed session meeting minutes for the June 23rd, 2020 special Board of Education meeting. Would anybody like any of that pulled from the consent agenda to discuss separately from the vote?
Nope.
I just have a question about one of the financial issues. Is that part of this?
Sure, go ahead.
On the credit card transaction report?
Sure.
And Jay, you and I think talked about this, but there was a $14,000 charge in there for a thermal temperature unit. Is that part of our new boiler unit?
No, that was actually we were originally, before, when we thought the guidance was going to be that we were required to take temperatures, that was a actual temperature screening device for students.
Oh, I see.
There's also a return. We've returned that item because it was impractical and to take temperatures and for all those other reasons that Lisa mentioned previously. So that's what that charge is for.
Okay. That's it.
While we're asking questions, I have one too. There were a couple of charges for Quest, and I saw one of them explained. Can you just go over that?
Sure. We have been providing, so typically, as you know, we've approved a intergovernmental agreement with Lake Forest. So typically, Quest bills Lake Forest for meals served throughout the year, and Lake Forest bills us. What these invoices are for are the summer food service. So for our families who qualify for federal assistance and are needing food assistance during the summer because school is closed, we've been providing meals to them on Mondays and Thursdays, most recently. And this is the bill that we are getting for the food that they provide for those families. So we're paying Quest directly because this is a separate sort of subcontract that we entered into with them. We are also getting some federal reimbursement for these meals. So because of that, we needed to have a separate contract, and we're paying Quest directly for them. Then in addition, there's one bill in there that is specifically for salaries and benefits that were paid to Quest employees during the shutdown between March and the end of the school year. Many of these employees had reduced hours or were not working, and Quest did apply for the payroll protection program and received significant amount of money to pay for those salaries. And we elected to pay the difference basically between what the employees were to receive on a full-time basis and what they received net of that PPP program in order to retain those employees so that they were able to provide food service for us in the fall. And that also is money that we are seeking some reimbursement for through state and federal programs.
Will they be providing food service for us in the fall?
They will. It will depend again on how many people elect to be in school, but in either case, we plan to provide, so meals are available for purchase for families who elect to be in school. They will need to be pre-purchased, much as they do at the elementary school, where a parent would log in, buy a meal for, based on the menu for the day. It will come to the classroom in a pre-packaged container, and then families who qualify for free lunch will also be receiving those meals. And then we're also looking at, for families who opt out but still need assistance with food, providing some sort of pickup arrangement like we're doing this summer, so that we can make sure that everybody is able to be fed. So it will probably be less than, it won't be a normal year where we will have the same type of service, but it'll be a reduced level, but we will have food available.
Any further discussion? All right, so may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda for July 21st, 2020 as presented by the administration?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Charlo, yes. Gatchall?
Yes.
Haig?
Yes.
Duran?
Yes.
Hill?
Yes.
Barry?
Yes.
Marzen?
Yes.
The motion is approved. Thank you. Item 7, we do have a couple of FOIA requests that are in the board book if anybody would like to read about them. We did public comments, and may I, before I ask for a motion to adjourn, is there anybody else like to say anything or make a comment? I'd like to thank Lisa and her team for what appeared to be an incredibly thorough and well-researched and a report that covered as many details as I just can't imagine how much time that went into it. So thank you. We really appreciate that.
Thank you.
So at 9:39, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
And unfortunately, we do need a roll call because of this emergency declaration. So roll call vote, please.
Happy to do it. Gatchall?
Yes.
Haig?
Okay.
Duran?
Yes.
Hill?
Yes.
Marzen?
Yes.
Charlo? Going with yes. And that's all of us.
That's me and me, Barry.
Oh, sorry,
yes.
Mark. You get to
Yes.
vote too.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you. Long meeting, but we appreciate it. Great job.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. Be safe.